good morning to everybody. And I'd like to mark this historic occasion as the first webinar being hosted by our new president. Welcome, Dr. Philip Arnold Tuanyo to PIDS. So our presentation is based on a policy notes with the same title. And I will be starting, and then I will hand it off to Mira, and then I will also be concluding this. For this policy notes, we have organized, next slide, as follows. Mira will be talking first about the rationale, and based on that rationale, delve a little bit more deeply into statistics, trends, and issues related to water use and access in the Philippines, as well as the existing policy environment. Then she will also delve a bit into prospects for water resource development after repurposing. She will be explaining this entire issue of repurposing, no? And then she will hand off back to me, and I will be discussing issues related to these prospects, as well as the implications for policy related to technical and financial implications, institutional implications, and informational implications. Without further ado, Mira, please.
Hi, yes. Good morning to everyone. Thank you, po, sir. Next slide, please. So we will be starting with the rationale. First, the Philippines has a highly fragmented governance system for water resources. So according to a policy note from DepDev in 2024, excluding the National Water Resources Board, there are 21 agencies performing 14 different water-related functions. One of them is the National Irrigation Administration, who is responsible for irrigation development and management of the national irrigation systems. So over time, extensive water rights allocated to NIA have fallen below the actual water uptake for irrigation and have not been transferred to other users. Next slide, please. So to address the unutilized NIA water rights, a memorandum of agreement between the Water Resources Management Office under the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, NWRB and NIA was signed on October 4, 2023. So based on the MOA, NIA has been holding over 1.3 million liters per second of water rights for the purpose of irrigation, which much of this has gone unutilized. So the MOA provides for the multi-purpose use of the allocation to NIA, including the following: for domestic and municipal water, hydropower, floating solar use, aquaculture, industrial applications, and recreation/tourism. So this gives way for a significant opportunity to expand access for various stakeholders to invest in water development. So before we go into the prospects for development after repurposing this water right, we will briefly examine the water use and access in the Philippines and the policy environment surrounding it. Next slide, please. So this figure shows the proportion of households with safely managed water by use in the Philippines from 2000 to 2022. The blue line here indicates that progress in expanding access to safely managed drinking water in the Philippines has been slow. So to define what is safely managed water, there are three conditions. This is drinking water from the first improved water source that is located within the premises of the user. Second, this is available when the user needs it. And third, the drinking water is free from any fecal contamination. So meanwhile, this red line represents the access to safely managed sanitation, seeing faster improvement, which increased by 17.2 percentage points since 2000. So next slide, please. So another important metric to consider when it comes to the allocation of water is the volume of water permits. So this figure shows the volume of water permits from 2012 to 2022 based on selected consumptive uses. This excludes permits for power generation. So the total volume of consumptive water permits was nearly 91 million cubic meters in 2022. And it shows here that the irrigation share declined from 80% to 74%. The industrial share rose from 11% to 15%, and the municipal share remained consistent at 11%. Next slide, please. So for existing policies in the Philippines, we currently have the 1976 Water Code promulgated by the Presidential Decree 1067. So this is the presidential decree on consolidating laws involving water resources, which includes its appropriation, utilization, and development, among others. So one of the underlying principles of this water code is that the state may allow the use or development of waters by administrative concession in the form of water permits. Uh, so what about the amount of water that can be used or appropriated? The measure and limit is based on the principle of beneficial use. So according to Article 20 under the Water Code, this is the utilization of water in the right amount during the period that the water is needed for producing the benefits for which the water is appropriated. So even though there were adequate legal grounds to revoke and reassign the unutilized water rights of NIA, an amicable solution was reached through a MOA. It allows NIA to keep its rights while also permitting multiple use of its available facilities. Next slide, please. So since the water rights are up for multi-purpose use, we have options for expanded water use. One of which is the municipal water assigned to public water districts by law, Presidential Decree 198. So essentially, these public water districts, which are independent and controlled by LGUs, are authorized to acquire water rights, land and water works, and sell water to supply the water requirements of a community. However, a World Bank survey found that 47 LGU-run utilities, 68% were operating at a loss. So this is because of LGU subsidies for water utilities having low tariff setting while production costs are high. Next slide, please. So second is partnering with the private sector. So according to the 2021 Philippine Water Supply and Sanitation Master Plan, about half of the investments needed to achieve universal access will need to come from the private sector involvement. The Private-Public Partnership Code, or the PPP Code of 2023, has defined the legal framework for private investors involved in public infrastructure projects. This includes several considerations in the PPP project design, including feasibility, affordability, and value for money. So next slide, please. This table shows the NIA water rights, converted and permanently non-restorable service area. So nationwide, based on the MOA, more than 1.3 million liters per second of NIA water rights have been covered on its repurposing based on an incomplete listing. So based on this figure, regions 3, 2, 1, 6, and 12 are the top 5 regions with the largest volumes of NIA water rights. So these are some of the areas that can be considered to have the greatest potential for repurposing. Next slide, please. So according to the WRMO, there have been over 100 parties that have expressed intentions to repurpose NIA water rights. So this indicates high interest from both public water districts and private investors alike. So in the public sector, MOAs have been signed with 10 LGUs encompassing water districts or group of water districts. Moreover, the provincial government of Cavite has signed a MOA for bulk water supply that includes the entire province of Cavite. Meanwhile, in the private sector, under the Maynilad Water Concession, cities of Bacoor and Imus and municipalities of Cavite, Noveleta, and Rosario has begun to source water from 4 out of 22 NIA dams located in the province. Next slide, please. So, bulk water supply is a practical mechanism for repurposing NIA water rights. However, the private sector investment faces two key challenges. So, for context, a minimum of 50,000 cubic meters per day is required to service about 50,000 households, which is about 300,000 to 350 individuals. So, this is equivalent to several large municipalities or even a small province. So one challenge on the supply side is the availability of surface water and the cost of upgrading NIA facilities to meet domestic and municipal standards. So the existence of NIA water rights and some NIA facilities actually do not guarantee that water is readily available for household distribution. So to determine the conditions, including the preparedness of its facilities, this will require a hydrology assessment and engineering evaluations. So now I will pass the floor back to Dr. Briones for the demand side and the policy implications of this study.
All right. Sorry, I was having some trouble unmuting. Thanks, Mira. So, on the demand side, on the challenges for private sector involvement in bulk water supply, so the idea is the water district should be able to accept the water supplied by the investor at a rate that will hopefully that they can sustain, right? And that they can turn around and charge to their consumers. So what's been probably happening, or most likely to happen, is that bulk water supply projects should undergo simultaneous negotiation with water districts while coordinating with relevant provincial LGU. So remember the quandary we had because there was an issue with 100% public provision through LGUs because they're mostly operating at a loss, and this is difficult to sustain financially. That's why we are inviting private sector in. But then again, private sector will also expect to be able to, at the very least, recover the cost of its investment and the operations for at least delivering water to the distributor. Next. So here is a potential test case. I think among the various letters of intent and so on, the most likely, the most advanced state of negotiations is probably the province of Cavite. So we visited them and we had an FGD with them. So this is likely a test case for a PPP arrangement for a bulk water supply for the province of Cavite, a very highly urbanized province, no? Especially the eastern side facing Metro Manila. There's already been a MOA signed between the provincial government of Cavite and NIA, unlike in many other areas where there's not even a MOA signed. And the intention is to repurpose 13 dams of NIA across the province for bulk water supply. So in our FGD, we uncovered at the time that we had it, I think it was late last year, perhaps if there's somebody from Cavite or from NIA now, they can update us. But as of the time of the FGD, the MOA could not be activated yet as NIA has not yet informed about the amount of water. Because remember, the priority under the MOA is farmer allocation. So there's still rice farmers, there's still farmers in Cavite that are still needing irrigation. So NIA needs to say, okay, we still need this much for irrigation water. And the remainder of the water rights are now available for multi-purpose use. But this has not yet been informed to the province of Cavite. Now, so that's the legal rights, right? But in fact, if you look at the actual dams and the utilization of the water from these dams, These are actually not, a lot of them are not being used for irrigation, going back to the original problem, right? NIA is sitting on top of a lot of water rights that are not actually being utilized. And because of that, decades of idleness and disuse, most, according to the province, are in dire need of rehabilitation and subsequent maintenance. And there are some initial estimates of up to 70 billion. So if a PPP investor is, if investor is coming in under PPP, they need to sort of plan to spend this amount and have a headache about thinking how to recover that 70 billion. Now, of course, this will require careful feasibility study before anybody rushes in uh, to plunk down 70 billion and worry about how to recover the cost. Interestingly, under the PPP code, there is now a provision under being now provided by the PPP Center called the Project Development and Monitoring Facility. So instead of the provincial government bearing the onus of doing this feasibility study, there is now support coming from the PPP Center itself for this kind of feasibility assessment. Next. Now, based on this experience, let's try to see whether we can draw, looking forward, some implications of how to take advantage of this opportunity being opened up by this MOA on repurposing NIA water rights. So not just province of Cavite, but all over the country where the repurposing might possibly happen, NIA and NWRB should undertake hydrologic assessment of first surface water requirements and resources, covered in the NIA water permits, both now, so now, right? So you need to allocate it now, but also because of investments and future urbanization and future trends in agriculture and so on. This is also needs to look at future requirements. So project future precipitation trends, magkaka-drought ba yung area na yan in the long term? Yung nearby na ilog na nag-feed ng surface water, adequate ba yung supply niya in the next 20 years? Mga ganun ba? As well as projections of future agricultural and non-agricultural land use patterns in terms of watershed integrity and expansion of built-up areas. So, of course, the water supply, the nearby river system, will be drawing water from a watershed, or it will be fed water from a relevant watershed. So what are the prospects? Is that watershed still having the necessary integrity to be able to catch, say, rainwater precipitation and feed it into the surface water? Next. Now, so that's the purely technical, right? So you just make a projection, right? But there's also the institutional implications. In order to invite the private sector, there should be as we said, a mechanism for cost recovery. If you have a current mechanism where LGUs are setting their own rates, it may not be possible to have this. It may not be welcoming to the business climate for investors. Instead, if you have a nationally regulated tariff setting and service delivery set of regulations, this might be more promising in terms of inviting private sector investment. So a national regulatory board has been identified as a key institutional reform under the DepDev's Philippine Water Supply and Sanitation Master Plan. And we agree with this, And the tariff setting, rather than let's face it, being heavily politicized based on local interest groups or local politics, it should instead be based on fundamental pricing principles that are consistently applied on a rules-based manner nationwide. Next. Further on in the institutional implications, so government should undertake a programmed approach for implementing water supply projects. Maybe it's not possible to roll out all of these assessments and immediately impose these tariff setting. Maybe it can be rolled out, depending on which areas can go ahead based on feasibility assessment. and on a prioritization scheme under the options outlined in the PPP code. So one of them includes blended financing. So blended financing, this will require public funds, right? And that's an important option. And the public funds should be delivered on a priority basis, no? So to put it simply, blended finance is recognized under the PPP code, where finance is both coming from the private sector as well as government through the budget, through the national budget, as well as possibly, if there is interest, from foreign donor agencies. And the idea of where the risk actually lies may have to also be discussed in terms of some kind of cost sharing arrangement, or sorry, risk sharing arrangement. Next. So all of this sounds very complicated, and actually, sa totoo lang, a lot of stakeholders remain confused, even with the very, just the idea of NIA water. A lot of people got excited, then they started sending these letters of intent, and then suddenly, oh, hindi pala ganun kalinaw. So there are informational implications as well. So with the support and leadership of the PPP Center, because they have the mandate under the law, concerned stakeholders, NIA, NWRB, LGUs, and of course, together with the private investors, should continue conducting roadshows to orient potential water suppliers and users. So indeed, PPP is currently sponsoring these forums, and in which, of course, stakeholders should express interest and actively participate, whether it involves government officials, private water companies, other private entities that will most likely eventually use the repurposed NIA water. Is there a next slide? All right, that was the last. Thanks for your listening.